Hi, everyone, and welcome to the ranch. We're back again with much uh, excitement about a guest we've had on before, Dr. Kerul Kassel. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She is the president and executive director of not only First Nature Ranch, but the First Nature Foundation. She is a leadership coaching giant, and she's also an author. And we are here today to pick her brain regarding emotional intelligence. Welcome, Carol. So good to have you here again.
So delighted to be here and honored. Thank you, Deborah.
Our pleasure. She's back by popular demand. Uh, Carol, enlighten us. For those of us who don't know, what exactly is emotional intelligence? Because we talked before the broadcast, I said, a lot of people watching are most likely Christians, most likely people of faith. And we can be spiritual giants, but that does not mean that we are emotionally giant. So talk to us about what is emotional intelligence.
Sure. It's kind of an academic term, but it has very real life consequences and impact. So there are really four parts to emotional intelligence. What it's really about is how can you be the best you can be by being self-aware first, what's going on within you that is then influencing the way you're thinking and then your actions. And then how can you adjust that? How can you regulate yourself
Oh,
to
my.
prevent yourself from going into patterns that are less than optimally functional? So there's the self awareness and self regulation aspect to emotional intelligence, but there's also the social awareness and social regulation component. I'll talk a little more about those, but because we don't live in a cave, we exist with other people.
Sometimes we wish we did live in a cave.
Yeah, almost every day
Yeah.
I wished I lived in a cave. So the self awareness and self regulation is so that we adjust, we understand what's going on within us. But the social aspect of it is that when we're interacting with other people, we understand what's going on with them and how what we're doing is influencing how they're responding to us, and then regulating our own social interaction to have a better outcome for whoever we're interacting with and ourselves.
You know what? When you use the word regulate, that really popped because I thought of regulating bathwater. you know, if you go to test your bathwater and it's coming out, it's too hot. Well, you could get burned. You could get injured. So what do? We put more cold on, we cool it down, we regulate it so that it is comfortable. And I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, is that kind of an analogy as to how we regulate ourselves when dealing with other people so that things don't get too cold and icy or too hot and fiery?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great analogy. Um, Regulation is absolutely that, and it's a wonderful parallel, um, especially for the context in which we're talking about it.
And what I'm hearing you say is it's our responsibility. When I'm interacting with others, it is my responsibility to regulate myself,
Absolutely.
to watch the nonverbals, to
That's
watch
right.
the tone of my voice,
Yes.
even under pressure, to watch the words I let come out of my mouth.
Yes. And behind that, to watch the assumptions that you're making that may or may not be true,
Mm,
and perhaps
wow.
check in with them, or at least allow yourself to question whether the assumptions you're having are correct. Because when you assume you're interpreting correctly, then you're having thought processes and taking actions and responding in ways that may be totally inappropriate.
Wow. Wow. So I guess if we're not sure of what we're assuming, we need to ask questions.
Exactly.
I heard this once in a communication class that when somebody is telling you something that's of vital importance and you want to make sure you don't misconstrue it, to say, let me make sure I understand you. Let me repeat back to you what I think I'm hearing. And
Yes.
that gives the other person an opportunity to regulate you
Exactly.
and what you're
To
understanding.
correct any misunderstandings or misinterpretations, for
Sure.
sure.
Wow.
Yeah. And I know that there's some theorists who say just repeat back what they said, but that doesn't mean you understand what's
Mm,
underlying that, or that you've interpreted those thoughts or those words adequately
yeah.
to have the best understanding you can have so that you can respond in the most optimal way.
Wow, that's powerful, Carol. There's so many different people that we interact with on a given day. And I think that when we are not employing emotional intelligence, sometimes we can do things, say things that are very difficult to walk back. And I've been thinking about this all week, knowing that you were going to be my guest. And I was thinking about the spouse who, in the heat of the moment, says, I wish I'd never married you. How do you come back from that? The teenage child who the parents say, I don't think I'm comfortable with this sleepover. And they're just trying to protect their daughter or their son. And the teen says, I hate you.
Mm.
Or the neighbor who thinks it's a good idea to pick a fight with the person they live 10 feet away from. The coworker who thinks it's okay to pick a fight with the person in the next cubicle. What do you do when it's something like that that's very difficult to walk back
Mm.
from as far as an emotionally
Sure.
intelligent person?
So if you're the person who's perpetrating that,
Mm-hmm.
the first thing you do is apologize.
Oh, yeah,
Of
good,
course,
good.
right?
Yes.
And you don't apologize by saying, oh, I hope you didn't misinterpret that.
Mm,
Because they likely interpreted it, that's a self-defense
yeah. Or you can't
response.
take a joke.
Right.
And yeah,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
that is not self-aware and it's not socially aware either,
Yeah.
right? So, if you're the person, you make a sincere apology, which means that you're apologizing for the effect that it has on them, whatever you said, whatever you did, and that you're addressing how you're going to handle this in the future, that you're going to do your best not to do anything like that ever again. You're not making excuses for yourself. That's a
Mm,
backhanded apology. If you're the person who's on the receiving end,
mm-hmm.
the first thing is to have some empathy for the person who's doing that to you, because our first instinct, of course, is to get defensive and to lash back out, but that's not very useful either, right?
Now you've got
So
two emotionally
exactly,
unintelligent people.
exactly.
Yeah.
So two activated people going at each other. If you can say to yourself, this person's maybe having a bad day, maybe there's something going on in their lives that's influencing how they're reacting to things. And so, first of all, it doesn't mean you do whatever they say or that you take in what they've said, just understanding that in that moment, something is going on with them that is causing them to be that way.
Mm,
And um, you can deflect or be like a duck
mm-hmm.
and let that roll off your back,
Okay.
and not take it so personally. It's often hard to do that, right?
Right.
It's hard not to take what somebody says. If somebody says something, your husband or wife says, I'm sorry I ever married you. That's going to be difficult to come back from.
Yeah.
That person is going to have to not only make the apology, but rebuild trust, because trust has just been broken. And so you can face that person and say, I don't know that you understand that what you did was really broke trust. I don't know if that matters to you. Um, or you can simply say, I understand right now you're not in a place where we can really have a good discussion about this. I'd like to, if that's something you're open to. Um, or you can just diffuse the situation by saying, I'm sorry, I can't respond right now. I'm gonna take a walk. I have to use the bathroom, whatever it happens to excuse yourself from the situation so you're not continually receiving that onslaught.
Yeah.
And it depends on the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the future of that relationship. It depends on what's being said, who said it, how it was said, in what context.
Yeah.
There are so many variables. But essentially, as you said before, you're responsible for your own reaction or response, better response than reaction. And that person is responsible for taking accountability for what they've said or done.
So what I'm hearing is you got to have some maturity.
Yeah.
You got to have some maturity. And the person who's not willing to take responsibility, not willing to try and walk it back, not willing to apologize, they're immature.
Well, a lot of us have times or circumstances in which we're immature. It's emotionally unintelligent, but we all are going to fail at some point or another. And if you're dealing with somebody who's just not able to hold themselves accountable, to realize what they're doing in this situation, then you take a deep breath and you walk away.
Well, you used a word, empathy.
Mm.
And that leads me to the next thing I wanted to ask you about. We hear that a lot today. And as soon as you hear, well, that person doesn't have any empathy, they get labeled a narcissist. And maybe they are, because I've always heard that one of the main characteristics of a narcissist is they can't feel what the other person is feeling. But as far as someone not showing emotional intelligence, but on top of that, they have no empathy. They don't care that they've hurt you. They don't care what they say. They'll do it again tomorrow if they get the chance. What do you do at that point? Is that a point where you really have to look at the relationship? I'm not talking about a parent and a child or anything like that, but being in a relationship or a coworker situation or a neighborhood situation, if the person just keeps on doing the bad behavior, what do you suggest?
Again, as you say, it depends on who the person is, the context, the existing relationship, the relationship you're hoping to have. And if it's somebody who just can't get there, you just got to separate yourself enough that it's not going to be a blight on your life.
Okay.
Because people have to be willing to change themselves.
Yep.
And empathy, it's like the most Christian value,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So you can have empathy for that person, but that doesn't mean you need to interact with them. If
can you say that again?
You can have empathy for that person, but that doesn't mean you need to interact with them.
Good. That's good. I feel like somebody needs to hear that. You don't have to keep you don't have to keep putting yourself out there.
Exactly. Yeah. There's no reason, to, I hate to use the term beating a dead horse, but there's, if the situation is not one where your influence can do any good, then you simply have to step away for your own well-being.
Yeah.
And for your own mental health.
Yeah. Some things are short-lived. Some things are just kind of a one and done. I had this happen to me at a work situation one day. I worked in an office of about 30, 32 people, and everybody was out to lunch except the front receptionist and myself. And I heard the front door swing open, and it's so hard it hit the wall. And he came in with both guns blazing and basically started saying, you insurance people, you're ripping off my brother. He can't afford health insurance. He's a small business owner. And he's going off on this poor secretary who doesn't have a clue. And it sounded potentially violent. So I made my way up there. And the first thing I noticed was he had a uniform on and a patch on his shirt that said Epcot Flower Festival. So I went ahead and I said, hey, I heard the conversation. I said, I'd really like to help you. I said, but first I got to ask. I said, are you involved with setting up that beautiful flower? I was trying to find something common to diffuse the to diffuse his volatile state.
Exactly, his activation.
So he lightened up a tad. And I took him back to my office, and I asked him a couple questions, and we got his brother, who was a small business owner, who was not making a ton of money, with a government subsidy. We got him good health insurance for $12 a month. Well, now I'm his best friend. And then I said, now that we've got that out of the way, I want to talk about what you do in the Home and Garden Festival, or the Garden Festival at Epcot. By the time he left, he had tears in his eyes. He asked if he could hug me, and I was just his best friend. And I think that my one son, he calls me the human bomb diffuser. And honestly, I was not aware that I do this, But I think sometimes we need to look in volatile situations. What is something I can do to just get this not so fiery, get this to settle down? And if you're dealing with an emotionally intelligent person, I think they welcome it. And I think it can make the thing turn around and become a little bit more healthy. What do you think?
Well, first, I want to applaud you for taking the tack you did and for your wonderful ability to diffuse the situation, to protect your coworker, and to be of service, of great service to this guy. You recognized that he was emotionally volatile.
Yeah.
You stepped into a potentially dangerous situation to diffuse it with kind words and kind action and empathy, right? You started out by looking for something where you could shift his attention and then also offering to assist him with something that clearly was, I mean, it wasn't him, it was his brother, right?
Right, right.
So, but still, he was very worked up about it.
Yes, yeah.
And you offered to be of help when probably he'd been through however many people and had gotten no help.
Yeah.
Now, so the example you set was very Christian and very lovely. Most people, as we talked about before, would get defensive, would make excuses, would try to shut the other person down. But you did the opposite by being human and by being of service. So, and that is even if that person isn't emotionally intelligent, because of the tack you took, which was to be empathetic and to offer to help and see what we can do, that opened him up to being more accepting of you and very much diffused his anxiety and his anger.
And I think when we take a Christian approach, when we look for what kind of kindness, just give me some kind of little entrance for some kindness. Kindness goes a long way with people. And I think when we do that, we are perpetuating kind children. I don't think that somebody that tries to be kind, I'm not saying I always get it, trust me. We all have our moments. But I think when we applaud kindness, we promote kindness, I think we produce kind children. Likewise, when you see parents that are bullies, that are volatile, I don't think it's any surprise that the children are bullies. So I think that we have to really watch what we are exemplifying out there, because somebody's always watching, and our children are watching us.
Our children are watching us, our spouses, if we have them, or significant others, our co-workers, our bosses, our clients, if we're in business. People are always watching. We're out on social media. Everybody's being videoed every day. Things are showing up on social media, whether you want them to or not.
One rant.
That's right. That's all it takes.
One rant.
That's all it takes.
And well, they might have deleted it, but you know how many people screen grabbed it? Kerul, you are all about nature. And last time you so wonderfully talked to us about finding calm in nature. How can we incorporate emotional intelligence with nature?
Sure. Just sitting in a natural setting and being with nature and not doing anything allows you the mental space and the time to reflect on what's happening in your life, to reflect on the difficulties you're facing and the challenges and how to address them best. If you're just constantly chugging along and you're not taking the time to reflect, and nature has been shown by many scientific studies to be a nervous system regulator. In other words, if your heartbeat is up there, if your brain is going like this, when you sit down in nature and just sit and be, all of a sudden your cortisol levels drop, your heartbeat drops, your blood pressure drops, and then your mind is more is made more accessible to think about what you've done, how you've done it, what you can do, what you plan to do, what you will do, right? With whom and how. So that's about self-awareness and self-regulation. Here at the ranch, we partner with our horses for the social aspect of it. So one of the things we do is we take people on a leadership course where they're taking the horse of their choice through an obstacle course, essentially. We call it the leadership course. So they go over a jump, around a barrel, do a figure eight around some poles with the horse without a lead rope. They have the horse push a ball with its nose or its foot, walk across a bridge. They have the horse step on a pedestal with at least 2 feet, all without a lead rope. And that's all about social regulation.
Wow.
Communication isn't just what you say, it's not just how you say it. It's what you do with what comes back to you, and what comes back to you isn't what you want to hear. We're dealing with 1,000 pound, or in Goldie's case, one of my horses, 1,700 pounds of horse. That's a lot. If that horse doesn't want to do what you want to do, what are you going to do?
Right.
So you need to adjust who you're being and how you're being with this other being in order to get a positive outcome together.
Yeah.
Right? In order to achieve the goal together. So that's about social awareness and social regulation. You do the same with your dog or your cat. But nature provides lots of opportunities, even if you're watching wildlife. Most people, when they watch wildlife, they want to stare at the wildlife, get as close as possible and stare at the wildlife because they're interested. You know what that does? That scares the wildlife away because they feel threatened, right?
Sure.
So another social regulation aspect is you see a squirrel and you want to observe the squirrel. Don't look directly at the squirrel. Look kind of aside, pretend you don't see the squirrel. You can kind of side eye it here and there. But if you just stare at it or you walk toward it, that squirrel's gone. Any wildlife, really, right? So you're walking in nature, take a walk on a nature path and you see some birds or some squirrels. A little social regulation there. But social regulation happens. I mean, here we do it with the horses intentionally, as to give people a bodily experience of what it's like to have to shift your focus and your approach when you're the being or the individual you're interacting with is not being cooperative. So that's the fun thing. That's one of the fun things about the ranch and how we address that.
I like what you said about the horse does not need a lead rope. Adults could take some lessons from that. Sometimes I just saw this thing the other day. It caught my eye on YouTube, and it was a young lady was in a huge cheerleading competition the very next morning. It's 11 o'clock at night, and her father gets in a fight with somebody out in the hallway that he knows. He called him his best friend, and they're swinging at each other. And the hotel staff calls the police at 11 o'clock at night before the next morning, this big day for his daughter. And they're getting thrown out of the hotel. And the wife the whole time is going, honey, please stop. Honey, please stop. Lead rope. Honey, please stop. Honey, please. And you see that a lot when somebody's very volatile. You see a partner, a spouse, a child even saying, just relax, just dad, don't do that. Mom, settle down, whatever. We shouldn't have to have lead ropes.
But we do have to I mean, and that person saying calm down, it's like when you're upset and somebody says calm down, the first thing you want to do is slap them, right?
Oh, well.
Right? Because you're not calm and you don't want to be calm in that moment. So
because you think you have a reason not to be calm.
Exactly. So, and that's one of the things about the horses is it's applicable to people. You need to match the energy that they're, if you're just like this and they're like this, no, it doesn't work. You have to bring your energy up here.
Okay.
Just like you've done. You told me a story that you did with your neighbor where your neighbor was being really confrontational and you had to step in and really use some strong voice,
yes,
some strong language.
Yes.
And you had to meet or actually slightly exceed that neighbor's ire.
Yes.
With your own.
Yes.
In order to create some balance.
Yeah. Balance and boundary.
Yeah.
This is not acceptable.
Yeah.
Don't do this.
Yeah.
So yeah. Any closing words?
Emotional intelligence and that whole journey, it's a lifelong
Sure
journey.
Yeah.
It's not something you learn this or that and, you're good. You're
Hmm.
emotionally intelligent, you're emotionally mature. It takes a long time. Mistakes happen a lot along the way. Just be kind to yourself, give yourself some grace,
Mm.
because the people who love you are going to give you grace.
Yes, yes.
So you should give yourself grace
That's good.
because you're going to fail a lot. We all do, and we all will.
Hmm. Grace and give other people grace. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you, Dr. Kerul Kassel. We so love you and so enjoy your intelligence and your wisdom. And we just thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for this honor.